Indiana in the Morning on WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com. Good morning, and thanks so much for being with us here today on this Wednesday. Abby Caylor is with us this morning, and she comes to us. Abby Caylor comes from IRMC via also Punxsutawney Area Hospital. The partnership with IRMC and Punxsutawney is a very strong one, and getting stronger all the time. But she was here last year to talk about Child Abuse Awareness Month, and she's kind enough to come back and speak with us once more. Abby is a CRNP, Certified Registered Nurse Practitioner, what she and others do in order to not only help children with child abuse, but help prevent child abuse is an amazing thing. Our visit this morning presented by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Law Firm and Best Personal Injury Lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you back with us here this morning. You know, we talk about child abuse, and I think people, A, don't really know how to define it, and B, don't really believe that it's happening in their neighborhood, but it's happening in all neighborhoods, unfortunately, in some form or another. The severity might be different, but child abuse is child abuse when it gets right down to it.
That's a good way to start, because a very good point is that, it's something that over time we hope becomes less stigmatized. Talking about child abuse is hard, and families tend to blame themselves. And I think over the past 40 years, hopefully, the work that we do in small communities with child advocacy centers and getting the word out to people makes it easier to recognize and then realize that there are support systems there, and that there's no one at fault. The child is not at fault, so that we can get resources in place. And there are varying degrees. Child abuse by definition is the maltreatment of anyone under the age of 18, whether that's neglect in not seeking health care, or physical abuse, or sexual abuse, or witness to violent crime. Child abuse can take any form and have different impacts in terms of the severity of the child abuse.
There is a growing emphasis on mental abuse of children as well. Children are so fragile mentally and emotionally anyway, that when somebody takes advantage of them in that way, it's particularly distressing. And I think it's good that people are calling attention to it.
Absolutely. Like neglect, anything in which children are just not supported, and mental abuse is a very real thing. And hopefully strides are being made in identifying that as well.
IRMC has a very good relationship with the Care Center here in Indiana.
Yes. We're very fortunate to have the Child Advocacy Center here in town. Child Advocacy Centers came about really just over the past 30 years. Instead of everyone operating in isolation between the district attorney and the police and the hospital, care centers came about as a place that are really very friendly. They're usually a house. It looks like a house. You walk up through the front porch and through a front door into a setting that is much less intimidating than a hospital or a police station or the courthouse. And everyone comes together to work there to support a child and identify exactly what happened. Everyone's working for an outcome, not necessarily for a punishment, but just to figure out what happened to a child, be it mental abuse, physical abuse, or trauma, and then get all the resources in place so the child is not re-traumatized over time.
I think it's really interesting the way you put that, because it really is. Everybody is working toward one goal. And whether you define that as restoration to a more normal existence for a child, or just righting a situation so that they can be put in a positive environment, however you want to phrase it, it really is everybody pulling in one direction.
Absolutely. And we're very fortunate to have as many resources as we have in town, between mental health providers, the Alice Paul House as a victim advocacy group, the Care Center, and the hospital, all just working together to that end.
Yeah. Child abuse can impact not only the child who is being abused, but if there are siblings involved, and even other family members watching as one member of a family abuses another. And the fear that they have about saying anything has to be overcome. There are just a lot of different impacts, and people, are more than one person can be affected.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say all the time, more than one person is impacted. A terrible thing for a family. The child is impacted. You raised a point. Sometimes it's a child actually abusing another child, which probably means that child maybe was abused at some point. So it affects the family. It affects extended family as families maybe are separated. It affects the community in terms of the resources, which certainly we want to have in place. But there are estimates out there that child abuse costs the country as a whole $500 billion a year in lost productivity because the parents may have lost productivity. Victims of abuse, it's proven, likely have 16 to 30% higher healthcare costs as an adult, that the Medicaid costs of a child of abuse are 10% higher than anyone else because of just all the resources that they then need. So it's something that creates a huge economic burden over the life of a victim of abuse, especially if unrecognized, which, the sooner we recognize things to put processes in place that help resolve some of the problems and prevent them from becoming chronic, helps reduce the burden on everyone.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. My goodness, you hadn't thought of that somebody who was abused as a child grows to adulthood, gets on with their life, and seems to have overcome that. But the long-term effects of what they suffered as a child can come back and really harm them much later in life.
Especially if not resolved. There's great data out there exactly supporting that people who are victims of trauma or abuse in childhood grow up, and it's because of the changes that happen. Being in an abusive situation, especially over time, creates a situation in the body where you're under chronic stress, like you're in fight or flight all the time, and that is unhealthy. It changes the biochemistry of the body. Victims of abuse are more likely to have chronic illnesses, even like COPD, because their rate of smoking may be higher. They're more likely to have obesity and diabetes and heart disease, certainly more likely to have a risk of suicide or unintended pregnancy or other health conditions. But the implications are pretty far-reaching, actually, especially if they don't receive maybe help to resolve the trauma.
Wow. It is a terrible thing to see child abuse or for child abuse to be occurring and nobody to see it. What are some of the ways that we can approach the problem? First, from the standpoint of somebody who is experiencing child abuse, what should that child or how should that child deal with it and who should they be in contact with?
Yeah, I think the good thing over time is that we have mandatory trainings that happen for healthcare providers and teachers and people in contact with children. And one of the things I hope our community does a better and better job of year over year is education in watching for the signs, be them subtle, like a personality change or less interest in an activity they previously enjoyed, or maybe avoiding someone, to more overt signs like bruises or injuries. And just not being afraid to make a report, or making sure that children are aware too, that there shouldn't be a stigma, in speaking up if there is a problem, and for everyone to speak up. And again, the process is not one, everyone just cares about getting the information and resolution. That report should be made and followed up in so that every concern is addressed to see if it's legitimate.
We would love to see that a child who is experiencing abuse would be able to go to somebody. We understand, though, the fear that they might have in doing that and the help that they might need. So everybody in that child's life can be a positive influence for them.
Absolutely. And so that's just it, raising awareness so that parents or any caregivers and teachers and people that are in contact with children regularly are really aware of even subtle things, to maybe just make sure that the family gets put in touch with a resource to help them if there's any concerns.
Yeah. And, I talked to other physicians and practitioners from IRMC. Maybe a surgeon, Dr. Dan Clark, comes in quite frequently. We talk to him about the latest advances in this or that, the latest technologies that are out there. Do we get those sorts of progressive updates in terms of how we're treating or how we're helping abused children? Are there new things that come out?
I think what's new is that we just get better at understanding the importance of recognizing trauma and trauma-informed care, that we get better resources locally, that we have trained forensic interviewers that are able to have those conversations with children. I think that's a real key piece. If you think about the fact that So children come into this house, and it is a friendly setting, but a place they've never, ever been, and they meet a complete stranger, and they end up disclosing the worst thing that's ever happened to them. So the fact that someone can actually do that and build that kind of rapport is amazing, and we have 6 individuals in Indiana that work at the care center that do that on a daily basis. And so it's actually probably much more low tech than robotic surgery, but very important in terms of the investments that the community makes and the care center, the work that they do to just advance something as simple as having the hardest conversation of a child's life to be able to get them the help that they need.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Those people are the professionals who have been trained. They still have to be of a certain mindset and attitude about life, and they're really, really strong and compassionate, and we salute them. But it's everybody's job to look out for abuse and to see what they can do to help.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it really does take a community.
Don't have to be a trained professional to do that. All right, so resources that are available for folks. The care center obviously is one of those.
Right, the care center here in town. Obviously, the hospital is always a resource that can connect any families or victims of abuse to additional resources. The community guidance center, any of the mental health organizations. The Alice Paul House is a tremendous victim advocacy center. So any of those places can really wrap around the family and provide all of the other information that they need, that may be specialized to the situation.
We would love to put people who deal with child abuse out of business by doing away with child abuse.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, we can't do that. What we can do is give them every resource possible in order to help kids.
Yes. Yeah. And we have made great strides. I think there are statistics that over the past 20 years, child abuse has decreased by 50%. So, I mean, much like this, just raising awareness, decreasing the stigmatism of a family needing help and resources, just making it more of a topic and something that, like you said, isn't something that we want to acknowledge is out there, but it is. And so in acknowledging it and making sure we identify where people can go, I think that makes strides towards elimination, hopefully.
Yeah. So keep your eyes and ears open and find your voice.
Absolutely.
Abby Caylor, thank you so much for coming to visit with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com. 8:25 on your Wednesday morning, and Boomer Sports next. Matt in the newsroom after that.